Welcome to the PahRooZings Appraisers on Purpose podcast. This podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? And what do they do now for their teams, their clients, and the industry? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
All right, welcome back. Welcome to our next episode, PahRooZings, The Power of Values. We're so excited here at the end of season 2. We give Jeff Hogan the credit for our PahRooZings Pub Chat is what we're calling this wonderful edition of gathering a couple of our season 2 peers to come back together and just share some of those life experiences, some of those professional encounters, whether they were good encounters or bad, whatever they might have been that helped shape them for who they are and where they've gotten to. We just really want to thank John. We want to thank Katrina. We want to thank Alexis. And we also want to thank Bob. Love your feedback. Appreciate it. Keep sharing. Right now, make sure to stop what you're doing and grab that link and share it out. Hit the like button, because the more you do that, the more people in the profession get an opportunity to learn from this. And as we know that the more perspectives we can share, the better and broader this industry can have positive impact, because all of us wish we had this type of opportunity back when we were a bit younger. You know, like Jeff Hogan, who's only still 29. So we could all benefit like that. So with that, we'll kick off this special edition of PahRooZings Pub Chats by asking this formidable question. So when you think back to your time in the appraisal and valuation profession, when was that experience, or when was that time when something happened and you're like, yep, I'm in this profession. Yeah, either I'm an appraiser or I am in. I'm not doing anything else. Like, this is it. Or like, I feel it. I'm going to be there. I'll kick it off because it's not a typical question. One of those experiences for me was when I already put an offer in on a 3-unit property. So for those of you who are not familiar with the vertical jungle that is Chicago, it's kind of like New York, it's kind of like London. It is 3 apartments stacked on top of each other like shoeboxes. And I recognized that the property was mispriced. And my hunch was that the realtor did not know what they were doing. I happened to show up. There were 7 people in front of me, literally like single file line kids in kindergarten being paraded through the building. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. These are apartments that also have 2 bathrooms, which is quite atypical in buildings that were built, say, 100 years ago. So there had previously been some remodeling that had gone on, and the rents were probably about 25 to 30% below market. And I remember walking through there, I'm like, man, if people really have no idea what they're doing, it should be really easy to invest. And at that point, I'm like, I think I could be an appraiser. Now, it has not been so easy ever since then, but that's when I was like, I think I'm in this. Michelle, how about you? When was one of those moments where you were like, I think I'm in this?
Yeah, not quite as endearing of a story, but after the crash of 2008, I thought, you know what, I need to get out of this business and try to switch to like insurance, and didn't like that angle as much as far as looking at properties and stuff. And I'm like, you know what, no, that's not me. That's not. I don't really like the insurance side of looking at properties and stuff, and people having to redo their homes after fires and things like that. I'm like, no, that is not it. I want to be forward facing. I want to be in the conventional space. I want to be doing things where people are like excited to purchase a home. I like to watch HGTV and things like that as well. So like that's what kind of excites me. So definitely knew back then, it's like, nope, I'm an appraiser. I'm not switching gears, and I'm just going to keep riding this roller coaster of a market. And away I went.
I love it. Friends, that is Michelle Golden of Accurate Group. Michelle, you get to call on who's next.
Oh, well, I got to call on my buddy, Jeff Hogan here. Got to.
Hogan.
We have that Valigent connection.
Have the Valigent connection, and Veros as well. Jeff, how about you?
Mine is a little, kind of a combination, a little bit of both of what you guys just said. So mine has to do with the fact that I actually think I mentioned this before when I were on the last podcast. I actually tried to and actually did get out of the appraisal profession.
Yes, you did.
Tried to do other things. I was in sales. As funny, Michelle mentioned insurance. I was selling all kinds of stuff, payroll services, yellow pages, all kinds of stuff, copy machines. I did all. And I remember going for a job interview. I went and got my master's degree. So I went back and I was so excited. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do something outside of appraising. I remember just being on an interview and get like a person looking at my resume and saying, what are you doing here? You're an appraiser. Because all my experience up until that point, even though I tried to dress it up and say I did all these other things and analysis and this, the guy just said, you're an appraiser. And it just hit me as like, you know what? I guess I'm an appraiser. So I was told that was what my profession was going to be. And it hit me after like 10 or 15 years that that's really what I needed to be doing. So that kind of hit me. And I went home. I remember telling my wife, she goes, yeah, you're an appraiser. So it's like, no, I'm not. I'm something else.
I love it. I love it. That's great, Jeff. Jeff, you can choose who's next.
Let's go with my namesake, Jeff.
All right, Jeff LeGroux from CES Valuation. What's going on, Jeff?
Man, mine is kind of like Jeff's. Is I was an appraiser, did appraising for a while, and then got out and did something else, and spent about 8 years doing that, and it was not good. It was not fun, and so I started doing appraising again, and literally in a cornfield in Indiana.
Ooh.
I was appraising Del Monte Foods, all of their plants.
Wow.
So I got to go see a corn canning plant and then how they made pudding cups and all that. And I felt like I was on that show, How It's Made.
Oh, okay.
And I got to go see all these cool things. And it was just a really neat thing to do. And it's like, this is fun. Not making as much money, but it's a lot more fun.
Got it. And Jeff, who you call on next?
Well, I've got my partner, Megan, down here.
All right. We got Megan Chakowski from Apprised by Walker and Dunlap. Megan, how about you?
Hey, so I think I realized that I was an appraiser and it was going to stick when I pointed out a property I valued to my husband. That was a pretty big indicator for me. I was like, I appraised that. And right when I did it, I was like, oh man, I'm that person. I'm in. That's it. Now, but in all seriousness, it was in a couple of different spots in my career. I've always worked for a large commercial real estate services firm. I started out in research and then landed as an appraiser trainee for a little while, and then joined as an analyst on an investment sales team and enjoyed the dynamic world of investment sales brokerage for a few years. And when I got back into appraising and took my courses and sat for my certified general, I don't know if anybody remembers it. It's somewhere around 150 questions, a couple different sessions. And I kept answering the same silly, calculate this area over and over again. And I thought, if I don't pass this, I'm not going to be an appraiser. I won't do this again. It was an absolute exercise in tenacity. And so I passed it and I thought, I guess I'm going to be an appraiser.
Oh my God. I love that.
One other point was when I was training somebody a few years later, I had a trainee and I was kind of going big picture and explaining everything. And he kind of looked at me and said, you really like this? I'm like, I think I might. So I'm an appraiser.
It kind of grows on you, almost like a tattoo, except, that just got pressed upon you as opposed to growing upon you. That's quite an undertaking there. So another fascinating thing to think about, we've all had these experiences at various times, and that is there were defining assignments that we were involved in. Like there's a handful of them all of us can think back to, and you're like that, whether you love that assignment or you hated that assignment, but you ultimately look back on it and say that experience made me a better professional. And it's always a fascinating opportunity to kind of share some of these, maybe they're war stories, maybe they're growth stories, maybe they're acceleration stories, whatever it might be. But I'm thinking, Jeff Hogan, why don't we kick it off with you this time? What are you thinking? What's one of those for you?
Oh, man. Well, the one that comes to mind is I had probably about 4 or 5 years into appraising, still pretty young at that time. I decided to go on my own, and I had started doing just random work, word of mouth. People knew I was an appraiser, gave out cards. So I remember getting a call from someone I didn't know just saying, hey, can you come out and appraise my property? It wasn't too far, so it was nice. I didn't know them. I don't generally do appraisals for strangers because I'm like, what's going on? I said, yeah, just no information. Just come out, need an appraisal. What's it for? I just want to know my house is worth. There.
Dangerous.
And it's that house that you drive and say, I hope that's not the house. I hope that's not the house. I know, and that sure enough, that was the house. So it was house was in really, really bad condition. I walk up to the door, and there was a lady there. A man had called. Lady is at front of the door. Said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, I'm here." I spoke to. I remember the husband's name, Art or something. Hey, he asked me to come out to an appraisal. Well, I'm not paying for an appraisal. I said, "Okay, that's fine." Is Mark? Yeah, he's in there. So I go in the house. Husband's in there. Yeah, Jeff, come on in and do the appraisal. So I'm walking into the house. It's very dark, and I turn this corner, and honest to God, there's a life-size bear that he had stuffed. That was teeth, paws. I almost had an accident in my pants. It scared the heck out of me. I didn't see that coming. And I look around, and he's got, he's a hunter, so he's got deer heads up on the wall, all of them. And she starts telling me, yeah, he's a animal killer, and I can't stand him. And I realized, okay, I'm in a divorce situation. But it just clicked. It said, okay. And she's saying, yeah, that's why I'm leaving him. She's telling me this while I'm trying to do the appraisal.
Oh my God.
Talking about her, she's this, she's that. So I said, you know what? Let me just walk away. Forget. No, you're staying. She goes, you might as well go, because I'm not paying too. So this went back and forth, and I'm thinking, well, I needed the money. I said, what the heck? I'm just going to do the appraisal. So I went on and did the appraisal, and they're yelling at each other, cursing each other the entire time. And so I said, well, you know what? I need to be paid like right now. So,
good for you.
I'm not going to finish this till I get a check. So he gives me, I think the check was, the appraisal, I think only charged like $300 for this appraisal. So he gives me a check for, it was a very basic house. So he gives me a check for $150 check. And he says to her, you give him a check for $150. She goes, I'm not giving him anything. I said, no, I'll just take the $150. He said, no, you're not taking the $150. He takes me, we go to his bank with her, and she takes the money out of the bank, gives me $150 in cash, and then I finish the appraisal. So I go take the appraisal back. They're both there again, still arguing with each other. They got these little kids in the house. The kids walking around. It was like something out of a weird movie, out of a trailer or something, because babies walk around with a diaper and dirty, and the house is filthy. Anyway, I take the appraisal back, and she says to me, the value is too low. I want my money back. And he says, no, it's too high. I'm like, what the heck? Because who's trying to get him to pay, I guess, more money? They're gonna sell the house. She wants more, and he wants less because he doesn't want to have to pay. It's just a nightmare. So anyway, I wind up just leaving the appraisal, leaving that house, and never looking back. I had my money, I left, and that was my lesson, to don't do random phone call appraisals. I think they got him out. Believe it or not, I think they got him out of the phone, but that's how long it was. Like back in my Yellow Pages days.
But Jeff, but you were putting companies on the internet. You and Al Gore were defining the future back in those days.
I knew it worked. That was pre-internet. Yellow Pages was the way to go. So I said, maybe put an ad in the Yellow Pages.
Oh my God. They found me, so. I love it. All right, Jeff, who's next?
Let's go with Michelle this time.
All right, going back to Michelle.
Wow. So
Michelle
a little
for 100.
Oh, wow. Okay. I feel like I'm on Jeopardy or Hollywood Squares. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like Hollywood Squares on the screen. Yeah.
It does. So I think if some of you heard the podcast, I did my appraisal work in North Carolina. So in when I would go to these houses, I would pet every cat and dog, whatever what may, when it came to animals and such for the house. So I'm at Cherryville, North Carolina, appraising a house. And I think it has about 15 acres. And I'm walking around the outside. It's an A-frame. I'm sure Jeff's like, oh, A-frame. They're so hard to appraise. But so I'm thinking, I'm coming up here. There's going to be animals. I'm going to see some, like a dog or cat. No, they didn't have either. So I'm walking around and measuring the house, and sitting on the deck of this A-frame house was this squirrel. And he's kind of standing there staring me down. And I'm like, these are some friendly squirrels. He's not running. He's not moving. So I start walking closer to the door, and he starts to like walk towards me, towards the door. And he stopped, and he's kind of staring at me. And I kind of leaned over. I said, well, hello there, little squirrel. He runs up one side of me and down the other and hits to the woods. And I stood there just stone cold, like, what just happened? A squirrel just climbed me. And so I knock on the door and I talk to the owner. I'm like, wow, you have some very friendly squirrels here. I do need to come inside. And they're like, oh, squirrel, that was Rowdy. That's our pet squirrel. So they call Rowdy and Rowdy comes in the house.
Oh.
Like follows me, and I'm like, this is really bizarre. So it had been raining, so I took off like my duck boots. I wanted to be, didn't want to get their house all wet and full of leaves and stuff. Had my rain gear, so I put it down. So while I'm going through the house, the squirrel is going from a nut bowl, picking out its nuts and putting them in my shoes and in my jacket. And they're like, oh, he likes you. I'm like, well, what if he didn't like me? So I was like, okay, I'm glad he liked me. He said, well, if he didn't like you, he'd probably, poop on your jacket. I'm like, oh, okay, that's great. So I'll take the nuts. So I even go upstairs. The squirrel follows me up there, and he's like darting everywhere. And in the patio doors, they had patio doors leading to like an upper deck. Like the squirrel was trying to figure out how to get out. So it's racing back and forth in front of the door. And I'm like, okay, this squirrel's got a problem. I'm like, hey, Rowdy, we're going downstairs. So he followed me down there, but I had to shake out my shoes, and I took a bunch of pictures of him, but I shook out my shoes and my jacket, and then I just went on my way. But apparently they found that squirrel from a baby, and it's just an animal. It had its own little cage it slept in, but you could see some interesting things out there when so that was, I carry that memory. That memory is like 20 some odd years old, but I carry that with me everywhere.
Oh, my goodness.
I still have the picture of that squirrel somewhere.
Oh, that is something else, Michelle. Oh, Michelle, love it. Michelle, who's next?
Oh, well, let's go with Megan.
Megan.
So because I focus on multifamily, I suppose I do go in and out of folks' homes. So I don't have any stories as fun as you will do. But on the commercial side, I would say, I think the question started out as like the wonky or craziest scope work. So on the commercial side, we deal with, lots of complicated, ground up, LIHTC, all different kinds of values, plan developments where you're componentizing the value. And so after about, 6 to 8 years, you feel like no one can send anything your way that you haven't already got a template for or some sort of workaround for, right? Yes. But it never failed. The minute I would say it, I would get something, in the door that had some odd historic credit or unique ground lease on it. But it really formed, my understanding of, what can be made more efficient within commercial real estate appraisal and what cannot, right? You have to create still some level of flexibility. It's not a commoditized product, particularly on the commercial side, even for the multifamily valuation. So for me, I think it was just all the different complicated assets and trying to figure out when I was going to get to a point where nothing would surprise me anymore in the valuation requests. And I still haven't gotten there. I still, every client has some unique request. Every, property has some story behind it that you have to figure out how it fits into the valuation and your ultimate opinion of value.
Got it. Megan, who's next?
Well, I think that would make Jeff next.
I think I'm
Jeff Drew, you're up, buddy.
I think the one, I guess the lesson learned deal, I was appraising a plant. It was up in Massachusetts. They made internal engine parts for F-16s.
Oh, all right. Fascinating.
And there was a couple things. First of all, it was right in the middle of the first Gulf War.
Wow.
This was right after 9/11, the first Gulf War, and so they're making military things there. So they had a guy with a gun follow me around.
Like a handgun or a rifle?
Well, he was in uniform. He was in
he probably had security clearance to get in there.
Oh, yeah. Well, then every time I would write something, we use these things called yellow pads with lines on them. And
wait, is that?
We wrote with a pencil and pen. And this is back in
the stylus.
Yeah, it's not a stylus. No.
Is it rechargeable?
No, it wasn't rechargeable.
Oh my gosh!
We took pictures with this stuff called film.
Film.
And so while I'm walking around, the first thing they said is no pictures.
Okay.
Well, when you're just starting out and the guys, you're taught to take pictures.
Of course.
And I've been appraising maybe 2 years, 3 years at this point.
Wow.
And it's like I'm sent off by the MAI that I worked for to Boston and go up there and do this plant. Well, he didn't tell me. It's just a plant. So I took my little rolls of film, my camera, and the first thing they did when I got there is they opened the back of my camera, which had a roll of film in it, and exposed the roll of film. No pictures. So they did let me walk back to my car, put the film in the camera in the car, and so then I had to write a note in my notes that said I wasn't allowed to take pictures. So they had to read the note. So we would walk around the plant, and I had my wheel because I measured everything with the wheel.
Yep.
I would write down a measurement, and every time I wrote something, the guy would rip the thing out of my hand, look at it, and see what I wrote.
Oh my goodness.
So make sure I didn't write anything secret. So we go around this plant, and I measure the plant, and it was all fine, and walked all through it and tried to take notes of how it was constructed and without writing any secret words, you know. And so I get to this deal, and there was about a 45 by 45 foot pit.
Wow.
And it was 10 stories. It was 120 feet into the ground.
Wow.
And this conveyor belt, these parts would roll off this conveyor belt out of this smelter at, I don't know how many hundreds of degrees, very hot. I'm not an engineer. And they would drop in the air and be cooled by the air.
Oh, fascinating.
Through this 10-acre or 10-story high hole in the ground.
Yeah.
And then at the bottom, if it didn't crack and it was fine, then because it wasn't touched by anything, it could cool in the right shape.
Wow.
And so then it was conveyed back up. Well, I had to appraise a 10-story deep hole in the ground because it cost like millions of dollars to build. So I learned about functional obsolescence. That was the moral of the story was functional obsolescence.
Oh, wow.
And it was like super adequacy or functional, whatever you want to call it. It was this specialized property.
Oh, man.
That could not be used by anyone else except to fill it back in. And I don't know how much gravel it would take to fill in a 10-story hole in the ground so you could use it for anything else. And it's like, but we spent all this money building this hole in the ground. Just because, obviously my Marshall and Swift does not have that.
Oh, man.
It is not covered. I did learn about super adequacy or functional obsolescence or whatever you want to call it.
All those things.
It was one of those things that did not make sense. I did drive around the building afterwards from the highway and took pictures. So I had at least exterior pictures.
Oh, man. That's something else, Jeff.
But very interesting.
That's amazing.
I got to learn about a lot of really cool. But like I say, I feel like I've been on a show of how they make that.
Yeah, I totally get that. Totally get it. Well, another one that's always fascinating is to think back. And what's fascinating about each of our guests here for this special episode is that everyone started with a firm. Some experience of coming along, getting to work with other people. And then, today, each and every one of them in their own way has distinguished themselves and has some influence in the industry and in firms that they work for. But prior to that, there was that point in time where someone, or maybe some ones, they were instrumental in the progression of a valuation professional. Maybe you call that person a mentor. Maybe you call that person a friend. Maybe you call that person a coach, or maybe it was just someone that kind of looked after you or really helped you excel as a professional. So when you kind of think back on your time in the industry, maybe who's one of those people that comes to mind, and what was it specifically about them that had such a strong impression on you, and has you where you're at today? Megan, why don't you kick this one off?
Uh, you know, so many people. Like I think that throughout my entire career, I've always found somebody to learn from. I think it's really important to, you know, expand your network, keep learning, always keep learning. If there is one person I would have to drill down on, yeah, I really can't. It's been a lot. It's ranged anywhere from, you know, MAIs. Yeah, there have been, you know, MAIs who have been, you know, were appraising well before I was born and are still appraising today. And you know, seeing their passion for it and learning, like, you know, kind of that academic way, and you know, just the real base layer, you know, from a couple of individuals and how they read reports and interact with their clients, but then also, you know, being on the investment sales side and understanding, you know, how the front end of deals are put together and what investors are thinking of. You know, it's learning, you know, having mentors on that side of the equation has really allowed me to bridge the gap and understand the appraisal profession, you know, and how we can fit in and how we can be a value add. And I'm not really answering your question.
Yeah, well, let me reformulate it for you, because I think it's helpful, because this really sheds light for others who, like you, at some point are new or early on in the profession. What was the experience that you had with one of those individuals earlier on, and that really touched you, that really moved you and inspired you? I mean, obviously you're still here, so there was a person or some persons, and you know, maybe there was a few, but if kind of get yourself back to like, wow, you know, I really came away from that interaction or that time working with that individual, and here's how the experience I had, and here's how I felt about it.
Yeah, so I could be getting a little bit personal. There was a individual when I worked in Washington, D.C., who is a female and a mother of two young kids. And I moved to D.C. when I was newly married, so I was 25 years old. And I get there and I learn about this branch manager who is, you know, just rising through the ranks and, you know, managing people and great with clients and business development. And I said, how do you do it with two young kids? And she said, my husband stays home with them. And I thought, is that legal? I
will respect that.
I grew up in.
No, Megan's only 29. Okay, I mean, it just wasn't that long ago. Okay, friends, but it was a perspective shift.
It wasn't that long ago, but I went home and I told my husband, this woman is, you know, just kicking butt, and she's got two young kids, and her husband stays home with them. And he said, I would do that. I would absolutely do that. If, you know, if we get to a point where we're fortunate enough to do it. And I'll tell you, for the last decade, he stayed home and raised my kids. I've got two of them. They're 11 and 8 now. And without, you know, meeting her and understanding her family situation, that has made all the difference in my career, allowing, you know, for my husband to have that conversation at such an early part of our marriage, and then enacting it 7 years later and allowing my career to flourish and him to do what he wanted to do, which was, you know, stay home and raise the kids. And so, yeah, I would say that was the individual that set me up for success way back when.
Oh, thank you for sharing that, Megan. It's inspiring and touching at the same time. I really appreciate it. Appreciate it. Megan, who's next?
Michelle.
All right, thanks. So, wow, just like Megan, there's been so many people. I try to touch on a few when I was on the podcast before, but I'll roll back to who started me out in the business, and that's Austin and Kathy Smith. Austin is an MAI, and they were like a family-run business, and we just happened to cross paths at when I was working in a newspaper for them. They were looking for a trainee. They placed an ad at the newspaper where I worked. I took the ad in. We talked about appraisals and things like that, and it seemed really exciting. I got to go see their home and what that looked like, and I thought, wow, they had a very nice home. I was just, not long out of college and living in a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment type kind of a thing. So when I saw their home, I'm like, wow, they must know what they're doing. This appraisal business must be great. So, they poured a lot into me, ethics, training. They're just good people and just really wanted good things for me and made me feel like a member of their family. So that was like the foundation to start me off in everything. spent about 7 years with them before I went out on my own. And even after I went on my own, we still checked on each other, and I could still call on him. So having Austin as a lifeline like that really helped me, because you need to have those people with a solid sounding board, in your life to bounce things off of. So I was very grateful to have them. Haven't talked to them as much recently, and every time I think, when I go back to North Carolina, I do need to visit them. But but stepping into the corporate world, just to throw a couple names out there, there was a Dar Kroll and a Brian Harris who weren't appraisers, and also not women, but saw something in me and wanted to kind of nurture that within me, and were mentors to me to give me a better risk mindset. Talk to me about lean management and other things. So kind of like maybe think about an appraiser at a different level, where I could actually, talk to the line of business and have a better risk mindset. So very grateful for them. And then I'll shout out Brian Swartwood. He's an appraiser, but he was my boss at Capital One, and he's now at Fannie Mae. And then, of course, the legend himself, Rick Langdon, who just retired as being an appraiser from Wells Fargo, and got to spend a couple of years with him at Wells Fargo. So had a lot of people within my path, like I said, that just poured some things into me and, really kind of helped me kind of learn, but wouldn't be anywhere without any of these people, really.
Yeah. Really appreciate you sharing that, Michelle. Michelle, who's next?
Let's go with Jeff LeGroux. Haven't called on
All right. Man, that's a tough question, because I think both Michelle and Megan said it, you don't learn appraising from one person.
Yeah.
You learn it. It's a constant learning thing. When you quit learning, you should quit appraising. But there are so many people that have given me so many parts, and no one's taught me to appraise. They all taught me parts of appraisal, and I've tried to put it together. And that some of them helped me try to put it together in a better way. And if I could name one person who really affected me, was Ted Slack. I don't know if you all have ever heard of Ted Slack. He was a appraiser for the Appraisal Institute. He taught a lot of classes. He was based out of Miami.
All right.
And I was a maybe second year appraiser, wet behind the ears, and what took income cap. It was cap A, cap B back then.
Oh, yeah.
And he taught cap A in Orlando, and he made it interesting. And it was
Is that possible? You can make that sounds heretical to some residential appraisers. Now, hopefully commercial appraisers are falling in love with that statement. But
yeah, I mean, it was just like, wow, this is not just, it was really cool. And most instructors, when they're through with the class, go, if you ever need anything, just call me, whatever.
Yeah.
They give you the kind of the standard line. So it wasn't 3 months later, I had to go do an appraisal in Miami. Well, the only person I knew in Miami was Ted Slack.
Got it.
And I called him. He not only helped me, he gave me an office. He said, come into my office. Here's this. Here's my comps. Here's the thing. Use this. Here's the zoning code. We had to look all those things up. There was no online research at that point. That did not exist. And he helped me through the whole thing. And just like, he wasn't making a dime off of it, didn't ask for it. Was just that help and confidence. And he said, you got this, because it was the property I was appraising was over my head.
Yep.
But he helped me through it. And it's just but I've had a lot of other guys help me through it, a lot of really good guys, and that's why I try to give back teaching and doing stuff like that. Cause it's nobody learned to appraise from one person. If you did, you need to get somebody else to look at your work.
That's true.
Because you will have all their bad habits. We all have them.
That's definitely the case. Love that. Jeff, who's
So
next?
off to Jeff.
All right, Jeff Hogan.
Yes. Well, these are great stories, and I, just got to echo what everybody has said. You just, over the years, there are people that just kind of, in appraising, outside of appraising, just kind of come into your life at a certain time, and they are instrumental in where you are, which you believe. I don't believe in, accidents. I think happen for a reason. So I do remember one of my first mentors. Now, none of these are household names, so you probably don't know these people, but First one was a person named Ken Stevens. And I think what I remember was he was the first Black appraiser I'd ever met, and was in a position of leadership. He actually was the manager of our office down in Orange County, California. So I was just blown away. It's like, wow, so it kind of inspired me just to see someone of color in that role. I just hadn't seen that. So, but he kind of took me under his wings, and I was very new to the business. I think I was still in my 20s, wasn't married or anything. He was about 10, 15 years older than me at the time. He might say less, but anyway, somewhere in there. But we bonded. We're friends to this day. That's 30 plus, almost 30 years ago, but we're still friends today. I talk to him probably at least once a month or more. He's still appraising. Just someone that I kind of like to emulate. I like to be around. We go to his house for Christmas sometime. He was married, he had a family at that time. I think I just got married. I got engaged. So he was at my wedding. So just kind of built that relationship with him, not so much from the appraisal, how to do appraising, because there's all kinds of people with that, but just kind of a stand-up guy, person of integrity, person of character, kept me out of doing things that I probably would have done as a young person. Don't do that. It's not a good idea. Just seeing how he carried himself, it helped mold me to be the person I am today, in addition to just outside of appraising, just a stand-up guy. So that's the first one. Next one was a guy named Steve Fierce. And Steve was an independent appraiser. I met him actually through this other person, Kent. We got to be friends, and he was a cool guy. He would just come in the office. Back in those days, you'd come in and drop off work, pick up work. And I just thought I just review his work, and I was a reviewer at that time. Just talked to him about having my own business. He was the first guy that said, went to lunch. He goes, yeah, you can do it. He's encouraged me to start my own business. He said, here's what you got to do. And I didn't list all his advice, but I just said, if I can just do good work, I'll get work. But I noticed I didn't do all the stuff he said, but he was always there along the path. He knew a lot of people in the business, so he actually referred when I did need a job periodically. As you go up and down with this market, he had a lot of connections, so he would put me in touch with people that he knew, that respect. He knew somebody. I remember talked about Bank of America. He knew people at Bank of America, so I said, "Yeah, connect with people there." And he said, "Oh, Steve Fierce likes you. Must be a good guy." So those kind of things. But unfortunately, he passed away of cancer about 5 years ago. But we were friends the entire time. I remember when my kids were born, his kids were born, and we just kind of had that great relationship. But he was also a great mentor, but also a very good businessman. He's the one I mentioned that knew more, that told me, and when you start a business as an appraiser, you're a businessman first and appraiser second. And I didn't understand that when I was in my 20s, but I do now that I'm in my 50s. That was 30 years ago. So those people and so many along the way gave me opportunities and saw something in me that I probably didn't even see in myself at the time, but they allowed me to get in positions where I could, be in leadership and kind of live out my, some of my dreams as an appraiser, even up until today, even up until my current job, my current CEO, Darius Majority, he gave me the opportunity to be a chief appraiser. So I just think there are people along the way that at a certain time in your life that have an influence and affect you in and outside of appraising. So.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Jeff. Couldn't agree with you more. It's a powerful thing. One of the other fascinating things each of you have touched on in from a different vantage point, but I'd love to hear your take on, at this point, given all that you've been associated with and the different areas of the industries you've been associated with, what experience do you have at this point in your career that provides you the most satisfaction? Being a professional appraiser, being someone who has responsibility for a lot of other people, each one of you in your own way. Impact a lot of people in the profession. But what is that experience? I'm sure it's several, but which one that comes to mind? I just get a lot of satisfaction out of fill in the blank. So Michelle, we'll come back to you.
First, I did. Yeah. Most satisfaction. It is actually talking to some of the people that want to get into this industry, some of the trainees that want to get into this industry. They have a lot of a knowledge, a lot of excitement, They just want so badly to be in this business. And I've talked to some people who are taking the classes, some people who are out in the field, and some people who are fresh into the business. They are so refreshing to listen to and talk to, and they just want to hear from you and hear what knowledge do you have. Tell me about your story. I want to learn from you. And it's one thing that I absolutely love to do. In fact, today I spent time talking to two trainees coming out of the Appraisal Diversity Initiative. Just wonderful human beings, and talking to them, it was such a great time. So that's what really excites me, and what satisfies me the most is like talking to people who have an enthusiasm for this business and who want to be here, because we know we have some people on the other side of the coin who are like, maybe this isn't their happy place anymore. So that's
in this industry, Michelle,
I know. What, Phoenix? No.
I don't know what industry you're talking about. I'm shocked.
But that's what gets me going. I really love the new people in the industry. Yeah,
I love it. All right, Michelle, who's next?
All right, we'll call him Mr. LeGroux up there. I haven't picked on him too much.
No, no, and I think I'm saying what the same thing Michelle was saying. The thing
You got those same couple candidates?
is the new people coming in. I love teaching. I love the new people. I really enjoy teaching. You don't get paid for it. I mean, it's a lose money situation. By the time you pay for your hotel room and go someplace for a week and teach, you've lost money, but it's worth it to get these new people started. I was very, very involved with the AQB in getting college programs approved for credit. But these people that come and take these classes and really want to learn about it, because it's just such a neat industry. There's so many things you can do. All four of us have the same job, and we all have very different jobs.
Yes.
And that's the neat part about it. It's just such a diverse industry in what you can do. You can spend your whole life doing multifamily and never do anything else. You can do your whole life doing houses. You can do industrial buildings, or you can mix them all together in any portion you want. And so, and it doesn't matter what corner of the world you live in, you are on real estate, and somebody's got to know what it's worth. So
That's true.
It changes. That's the other thing, is it changes in value. It's just really neat. I love it.
I appreciate that. Jeff, who's next?
We'll go with Megan. Let's get Megan on.
Megan.
So I'll take a little bit different perspective. We, being from a large commercial real estate services firm, as a fee appraiser, it's commission based. There's a lot of transactions coming at you at all times. You're not necessarily in control of your workflow, because the clients need you to get it done to keep the capital transaction market going. And, so leading a tech-enabled platform and really identifying more efficiencies with both how data is aggregated, how we, produce appraisal reports or think differently, leading the kind of change in not just training the next generation of appraisers to harness technology, but also leading the established senior appraisers towards a new path on how we can keep up with this transaction market. Let the appraisal profession be fun again. You've touched on it a little bit. You've got some angst in the appraisal profession. There's some negativity because it has gotten very, very difficult over the years to maintain the same level of billings but produce this much more, because fees have stayed, fairly flat or declined, over that period. So really paying attention to a new way of getting through an end-to-end valuation process, leveraging both humans and technology, and just making sure that we're getting as much out of our, 40, 50 hour work week as possible, and not have to put in the, 70, 80 hours that we've done over the years.
You mean you wouldn't work for Jeff Hogan? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, Jeff. That's the way it goes. How about you, Jeff?
It's funny. I was going to kind of pick wife too. So what Megan said is actually the second part of what I was going to say. The first part I'll just say real quickly. for me, the most exciting thing, other than the obvious that they've mentioned about new people, I obviously love training and bringing in people and seeing their excitement. But for me, it's always been, maybe not always, but as I've been doing this a little while, I just like getting that weird house. I used to be afraid of those, but now I like that real oddball property that nobody can figure out the value, because to me, it requires some detective work. It's like a puzzle, putting it all together. You know, I watched like Dateline in 2020. I'm always saying, oh, yeah, she did. She did. Yeah, the husband did. So I'm always kind of figuring that out. So I'm always trying to figure out the story and who did and the who done it. So for me, those kind of properties always like that, because it was really hard sometimes to put that puzzle together. But if you did it right, believe it or not, it came together most of the time. It's like, wow, you know, you start putting the adjustments in. This doesn't look like this is going to make it. And then you start putting things in there and adjusting for this and adjusting for that. And a lot of times it comes out to a nice, you know, succinct number that makes sense. So that's one of the things I enjoy. But then the other part now, which Megan touched on, was more related to what I'm doing now, is the technology piece, because we talked about, right, before, an appraisal back in the day was more like doing a fourth grade art project, right? You'd have to put the photos on the square. You'd have to sketch the little thing on.
Double-sided tape, very important.
I get the arrows. Got to take the arrows on there. Yeah.
Forms and worms.
Forms and worms.
You make a copy of the Thomas guide on your bin. You have to go. So that was, you know, it was like like I said, a fourth grade project, which was, you know, producing one appraisal. But now, with technology, a lot of those steps have been eliminated. But I think most of us kind of, and I'll speak for myself, we get to this point where it's like, okay, that's enough technology. But really the technology, to like what Megan said, and Shell mentioned as well, is really the exciting part and of this that I see now. And then working for a company that's technology is even more, because I see all that can be done. Whoa, we can do that? So when you think about that and how many more tools we have at our disposal that we did not have 20 years ago, it just makes it fun. And you can do to me, a better quality appraisal, and you can do it actually more efficiently. So that's but that takes some learning. So I've always, like I said on my podcast before, I like learning this stuff. So for me, some of this stuff is exciting, but I could see how some people it's a threat or it feels, you know, too much too soon. I mean, you know, technology's coming at us, you know, so embracing some of these things I think are exciting for me.
Love it. Love it. So as we got two more rounds, but before we jump into it, Jeff Hogan, here's the fun next question. What question would you like to ask one of your peers? In this spot, you're like, oh my goodness, I knew this was a pub chat. I didn't see this one coming. Sorry, I'm just drinking it's tap water. Otherwise, it'd be a cold beverage. But so what question would you like to ask one or more of your peers?
Okay, I'm gonna go with Michelle. And I'm gonna say, Michelle, if you could do one thing differently in your career, or a decision you made in your career, I know the answer to what I would say, so I'm gonna ask you, what would you have done differently looking back on your career? There's like, you're at this crossroads in your career at some point, and you could have went this way or that way. Is there anything in your career, if you have one, that you say, you know, I wish I had done this at that time? Anything like that?
Woo. That's really tough. You know, I've been faced with those decisions to where it's like, do I go left or I go right? And felt like I've taken the career. So I'll talk about maybe like a crossroads I came to early on in my career, where it was, do I stay in having my own appraisal business, you know, where I have complete control over my life? Well, somewhat. I mean, you know, the market can be, but where I have control over like my time, you know, what I do with my family, things like that. Or do I, you know, then start to do a career in review, you know, start to move into more like the corporate world. So, because I came there, I'm sitting in North Carolina. It's like, do I move to Texas and start to do review appraisals? And, you know, and I started to look at, well, what do I really want to be when I grow up, type kind of a thing, right? You know, where do I see like my career going? And I really love the appraisal business. Market can get kind of rough. So it's like, how can I get more stability, but still be able to keep doing what I love? So I sat there at that crossroad of like, okay, do I close down my business, you know, hand it over to another appraiser, or do I take a leap of faith that felt like moving from North Carolina to Texas and taking that leap of faith? So felt like it was a good time because it was right before the subprime market crash, and felt like it was a good move because I ended up getting, you know, a little bit more stability in my life with some benefits and things like that. So if I hadn't have done that and had just stuck with an appraisal shop, I mean, I would have had to weather the storm just like, anybody else, and really not have grown. So it really came to an opportunity of like, do I grow? So I felt like I made the right decision, in that. And so whenever it came to looking to the next level in my career, because things would kind of like reset with the market, and I'd have to kind of decide, well, all right, I'm trying to get to a manager role, or I'm trying to get, the end goal was, obviously to get here to chief appraiser. But, at every step of the way, it's like I take 2 steps forward and 1 step backwards if there was a market correction or a company would go out of business or whatever. So always took a lot of time to kind of examine things and like, should I really be doing this before I took that leap? Of course, and trusting my family, occasionally calling Austin Smith for some advice, but really, really like stopping before I took those big leaps, because I'm not one of those. I'm very type A. I'm going to think it to death before I plow forward. So, really feel like I've taken the time. But thanks for asking though, because I'll pitch it. I can pitch it back to him. Can I pitch it back to him?
Yeah, everybody gets to ask a question, Michelle. You could go back to Jeff or Megan, whoever you want, or a couple of them. It's all good.
Yeah, because Jeff said he knows his moment. So go ahead, Jeff, because that's a very tough question. I'd hate to ping pong that off of somebody else. So what was your your fork in the road that took you?
Yeah. So for me, it was early in my career. I think it had been appraised a couple of years, and I think I mentioned this on the podcast before, that I had the opportunity to learn commercial before licensing. And because then you could just appraise anything you had training how to do. So you didn't need a license per se. This is late 80s, early 90s. So so that opportunity was there, and I didn't seize it at the moment. And so that would be the one thing, because I don't know, like we said, Michelle, I think Megan, one of you mentioned doing commercial. I thought about the fact that I'd be basically working on the same property or the same project for a month or 2 months. Yeah, that was you said. So I did know that, and I knew I'd be in the office more, and I like being outside. I was one thing about being an appraiser, you got to go out every day. But I knew that was one thing I didn't like. However, looking back on it, I wish I had gone and done it at the time. I probably still would be doing residential, honestly. But I think at that moment, to get that experience, going back to what Jeff said, is that you would have more options in specifically in the down market, right, to do different types of properties other than, say, residential 1 to 4 units. So that would be the only thing. But other than that, the profession has done well by me and my family. And I don't know, Megan, I tried to get my wife to go for the stay home, that thing. She didn't go for it. So she said, you better go work. So, but yeah. So other than that, it's been good.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, Megan, what question would you like to ask one of your peers?
I think I'll open this one up because I think everyone's probably got an opinion. How do we recruit the next generation of appraisers into this profession? What is the selling point, or what do we need to change in order to make it more interesting of an industry to join?
Megan, you get to call on who's going first.
And I'll also add in there, I think the Appraisal Institute just released their new stats for 2023, and they surveyed from like 2019 to 2022. Mm-hmm. I think that the over 55 crowd is around 68%.
Oh my gosh, that's such a shock. I'm blown away by those details and that data.
So I'll ask Jeff LeGroux, my commercial brethren.
Okay. Well, what's really interesting is this has always been an old industry. Yeah. When I first became an appraiser 40 years ago, the average appraiser was 54 years old.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And they said, oh gosh, we're going to run out of appraisers because they're all old.
Wow. Fascinating.
So there are fewer appraisers than there were 10 years ago by 20% already. And it is a huge problem. Probably until recently, I would be willing to bet somewhere around, I know that the AI did, and I know the foundation did a thing, 80% of appraisers work in a one-man shop.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And Another 10% are in 2-person shops. So people, and you know, most appraisers work by themselves. They work out of their home. They work out of their basement. It's not a group dynamic thing, because if you have 10 appraisers in an office, you're still all working on individual jobs. It's not a help kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's really hard. And I've had, I think, 7 or 8 trainees in my career.
Mm-hmm.
I've lost money on all of them. And that's the problem, because if you take time to train them correctly,
Yeah, that's true.
you're cutting back on your production to help them, and you got to pay them enough so that they can eat. You know, that's a really tough. Megan's got the hardest question we've had. I mean, that's an industry question of how do we get new people in. I know, Michael, you're doing a mentoring program with people, and I think that's fantastic. And that's one of the things you and I've talked about a lot. And I think it's really, really important. One of the things we've got to do is make it so you can make a living when you start. It's really hard for a kid to be a commercial appraiser. You've got to have a college degree. So you go and spend $30,000 a year if you went to a state school now.
Can you get an education for $30,000 a year? I don't mean to be.
At some of the state schools, you can. That's kind of it, though. And you probably lived at home with your parents.
Yeah.
But you're $100,000 down no matter what way you go it. And you're going to come out and get somebody to start for a $25,000 a year job. You make more at McDonald's. And it's, you know, but there again, and I can't remember who said it. I think Jeff was talking about his $300 fee, but there's guys out there today charging $300 for appraisals, which is criminal. And everybody says, well, we need to raise fees, but there's always the one guy who won't. And that one guy who won't keeps them down for everybody else. And so it's kind of that catch-22. It's really, really hard. I mean, I think I saw a thing a few years ago that way over half, I don't remember the number, of the people that are appraisers, new appraisers, it's because they had a family member who was an appraiser. And everybody knows they got the son or the daughter of the appraiser is the next appraiser. So to expand beyond is going to be really, really tough. Of course, there's big pressure. I know, especially you residential guys can probably say more about it, about all this automated stuff they're trying to go to. And that probably is good for some of these row house subdivisions where they're, you know, pickle, bun deal. But I'm with Jeff. I like all these custom things. I like seeing the hard projects, the interesting thing. I've never been in 2 industrial buildings that were the same, because they're all built around a machine that makes something. So the building really isn't the thing. So it's really going to be tough. This is a tough question, Megan. Thank you. I don't know that I've answered it because I don't know there is an answer. But we've got to figure out a way to let people, it's a great industry. It's a great opportunity. We all have very free lifestyles. We get to pick our hours. We have to work at somebody's beck and call to get a check. But at the same time, you know, if we want to take a day off here or there, we can do it. If we want to work on Saturday and Sunday, we can do it. If we want to work at night, we can do it. But we get to pick. So it's a great way. And the remote deal, I mean, I work remote now, which is wonderful. I get to live in Fort Lauderdale and work for a company in Atlanta. And so there's a lot to it.
Love it, Jeff.
I will bounce this off. Let's go to Michelle. She hadn't had it talking about.
Oh, Michelle, we haven't heard from you in quite a smidge.
Right, there we go. I think there are a lot of people that are actually, pouring, into this problem and trying to solve it, right, with a couple different avenues, with PahRooZings coming out and, trying to take care of the experience piece. Then you've got the Appraisal Diversity Initiative trying to bring people in and, pulling in like the Urban League and some other places. So I think there's a lot of people trying to pull them in. I can tell you from talking to some of these people that are part of the Appraisal Diversity Initiative and, trying to interview for some of these roles for trainees, they have a passion for real estate. They're excited about it. So like I said, like I've said before, it's very infectious, and you want to be around these people, and you want to help them. So it's almost like this is our mission to now bring these people into the industry. And it's like, this is the cost that it's going to be. And you have to kind of like bake that into your, just as like another expense. I think we're obligated to do this. I think it's something that everybody needs to take a look at. I know a lot of people will stop and say, well, I'm going to train somebody, they're going to take my business. In my podcast, I talked about how I worked very fairly with my MAI, and we worked out, I'm going to live a little farther south. I won't cross this line. You've given to me, I'm going to be fair, and I know that maybe that's not what's going on, but, you just have to have those conversations. But at this point in the position that I have, it's like, I'm going to give back. I'm going to, try to do everything I can to help out this industry, looking, at a training program ourselves. But it's something that, we're all going to have to be a little, maybe a little less selfish and holding on to the coffers here and say, I'm going to help out others, and we're going to crack this industry wide open, and, involve these avenues that are already there with the diversity initiatives and things like that. So there's plenty of people out there you can help pour into, because I know even Jeff, we have a friend in common, Thaddeus Dawson there in Atlanta, who's trying to do good work there as well and pull people in. So you just have to support the people who are out there in front saying, I want to change the industry, and back them financially, emotionally, everything, and just back them. There's my thing.
All right, Mr. Hogan, saving the best, but almost not last, because of course we want to hear Megan's take on this as well.
Well, I have a little different perspective on this. I don't necessarily believe that it has to be a money loser or a losing situation. I mean, some do it that way, but I see it a little differently. First of all, I think that the target, and this is part of the issue, part of the challenge, I'll say issue, part of the challenge is we need to go after the right people for this profession. And I've always felt that, even though I did one of the few that came out of college and started appraising right away, that I think the average age, just from statistically coming into this business, are people in their 30s and 40s. So that explains part of the age thing. And that's because people are coming from other professions into appraisal. They don't come right out of college to appraisal. So they're coming from either the mortgage business, construction business, whatever, and mechanics. I mean, I've trained people from all kinds of different perspectives, but very few right out of college. And I think if you think about that perspective and you go after that group, even at these ADI conferences, Michelle, we see young people, but we see a lot of people that are realtors, mortgage banker, they're 30s and 40s. They're not young 20-something year old. And I agree with you, Jeff. Those people aren't going to take a job making minimum wage, like you said, McDonald's, but somebody, this is kind of the dynamic, somebody changing careers has a different perspective.
Absolutely. It's a second career.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to school. If you go to college, you don't make money going to college, but you do it because you're trying to build towards something. So my approach is, let's go for people that are looking for a second career, maybe a part-time career. Maybe it's not something they want to do full-time, but hey, I got my kids are in school or they're whatever, and I want to just have a job where I can make a decent living. And, I got maybe something else going or whatever. But I think that's that group, like the junior college group, I guess, or community college, that group, people that go to those vocational schools and stuff like that, that's the target market. And those people are looking for these types of, this is a good fit for a lot of people. It's not a good fit for everybody. I think we need to do that. First, that's the first thing. Now, let me jump to a couple other things. I agree with whoever said it, the trainee mentor program. Okay, that's a problem because of what Jeff said. They don't, when I first started, the reason I could get a job without having a family member is because back then banks would hire appraisers. So you can go work for a bank as a trainee, they would train you, you'd work for them, so on and so forth. I was telling Michael about the company car back in the days, but that's changed.
He was stacked. I mean, he had all the goodies.
So that's not how it is right now. Like Jeff said, you generally are working independently. So even if I am training somebody, part of it is, look, I'm training you out of my basement. So I'm going to have you come down to my basement or my bedroom and I'm going to have you sit next to me. No, that's not. I mean, we have technology to do better than that. But still, there is still an element of this that requires some one-on-one time with that person. And it doesn't have to be one. I mean, we have a limit of 3 trainees that in most states per trainer. I think that's too low. I think, why can't you have 5 trainees, because you don't take you all day to train 3 people, especially if they're at different phases of their training, because you have certain appraisers that are already pretty much independent. Now, you can't take 5 brand new trainees at the same time, but maybe you take some, you phase them in. Now you've got people who basically are able to do the whole appraisal by themselves. You're just reviewing it, you're signing it, and you can make money on that. Because if I got 3 or more people that know how to do the job and all they're doing is having me review, they're happy to do that because they're trying to get into the business. They're not going to know they're not going to make what I make, but they're happy for the opportunity to have somebody to mentor them and train them. So if we had a program like that, we also have in addition to PahRooZ, which I support PahRooZ, but I've always said PahRooZ is not an end-all be-all, especially for residential, because there's so many nuances that you can't put into a computer. But I do think it's an option that should be promoted. But we also have a practicum where you have basically a classroom type setting where you can have maybe 15, 20 people in there all learning how to do appraising at the same time. You go to houses together, or you have shared properties that you look at. Now you're moving the needle. But even if with the way it's set up right now, with one person training 2 or 3 people, that doesn't move the needle. And we're kind of stuck there. I understand why we have it, but I think it's leading to a lot of barriers to entry. And even as much as I love ADI, I've spoken at some ADI conferences, been to ADI meetings, but even that stops off at the education piece. It doesn't take them to the experience piece, which PahRooZ, I say, is trying to do that. But that's a big gap. And I'm like, one more thing, I'm gonna get off my soapbox. There's no real bridge from residential to commercial. I mean, you're basically starting over. I had been in the business 20 years, other than that first time when I was young. But basically, nothing had changed. If I went back in 20 years, even 30 years later, I'm a trainee. So all those years of residential work means nothing to a commercial appraiser, because in their mind, you haven't even done an appraisal till you did commercial. But I'm not saying, not you guys, these other ones. But I think there's a piece of that is not that we need to fix from the residential to commercial. That's a separate question. But I think it's related, because how do you bridge that gap, and how does somebody go from a trainee to being able to, you can't even sit for the exam till you've taken so many years of experience. I don't have to do that for a law degree. I can go out, pass the bar, the next day I can hang my shingle and take cases. I don't have to. Now, granted, nobody may not give me a case.
Might be smart people like giving you a case.
I may not, but I can do one. Nothing is prohibiting me from doing that. I can't even take the exam until I've sit with some, and you have to sit with one person. I was just talking to our state examiner here in California. It's like, this whole thing has got to kind of be with one person. And then if you move, we had a person that I was trainee with that wanted to move states. Well, guess what? If you move to another state, those hours don't count towards like I'm in California. Those don't count towards your California hours of education. That only counts for Texas or Nevada. So basically you wasted your time. So there's some things like that I think we need to fix. We need to tweak and make it easier for someone who wants to be in this profession, these enthusiastic people. I don't know how many times I've had them come up to me afterward, almost in tears, because they can't get supervisors. Nobody will take them on. So we actually, this is a segue, a shameless plug, but we actually do have a program, Valident, trainee program. Michelle knew I was going to go there.
In case you wondered, this is Jeff Hogan.
That's right. I approve this message. So we take someone who has experience, who has no experience, but has the class as a trainee, and we will train them. And we're incorporating or asking lenders to partner with us with a certain amount of orders to support that. We do all the training. We have the trainee. We have the trainer. All they're doing is just giving us orders from their group of orders, 10%, 5%, whatever of the orders they already have toward this program. And we take that person and take them to the next step. So that's what's missing.
That's fantastic.
And that's what needs to happen. We need more of that. And I'm not saying we're the only ones that can do that. Other people can do it too. But until lenders and realtors and the Appraisal Institute and the Appraisal Foundation all get on the same page, we're going to keep having this roadblock. And it bothers me, because I know these people have spent a lot of time to go through these appraisal classes, especially institute classes. They're not easy, and they're using the HP-12C, which I think appraisers are the only ones in the world also using the HP-12C, because we have this thing called Excel. We have this new thing called Excel. It's really cool. But we're still using.
Is that like the abacus?
It's kind of like that.
Okay, I was just checking.
But we're still using HP-12C. So they're going through learning this learning this computer. I use HP-12C, so I'm talking.
Well, that's what I learned too.
But the HP-12C is not something else technologists today. So those are, I know
Let's
that's
put that up there for all the
Oh,
viewers.
and see, for those of you who can't join us visually, we have a glorious. Oh, look at that! It's like oh my 12C time. You know, everybody's pulling out.
Everybody take theirs out. Everybody take it out.
Yeah,
In
They
the
can't see this
box.
on the podcast.
No, they can't see that, Jeff. They can't see that shiny set of gold against that those colorful rims on your glasses.
You all are holding up the hardware. I have that on my phone.
Oh, see, I was going to say, I'm just going to pull that. Oh, yeah, I got that app on my phone.
There's an app.
I love that app on the phone.
Well, now I gotta go find the app.
Buttons don't have that nice.
It doesn't have the feel.
No, it doesn't have the feel.
It's like satisfaction of pressing the button.
Jeff Hogan, do you still use a BlackBerry as well then?
Shame.
Yes. And I still have my Walkman, so I still use my Walkman.
I like mine was yellow. Mine was good.
Player with my Walkman. Yes, I still use all that.
I love that. I love it. And let's bring it back to Megan. Megan, I'd love to get your take on it, as well as you guys are doing some fantastic stuff. Not that you have to talk about that, but what's your take on how to solve the problem?
I think we have to make the profession less complicated. Take down the barriers to entry. I think that, at Apprise, we're starting with focusing on multifamily. It's data aggregation. We're making the process less complicated, adding more efficiencies throughout it, taking the model of a team approach where there's a senior lead and mid-level and some associates who understand their role in the process, leverage the technology. I think that the technology plays well for the younger crowd. They're interested in it. They don't even really want to come out of school anymore and play with Excel. They want, what they've grown up with, which is, the internet. It needs to be intuitive. And the more intuitive we can make the process, and also aggregate the data, offer it up in a meaningful way so that they're able to scale quicker throughout their career. It's not going to happen for all of commercial real estate overnight, but there are areas where we can, really make the process more efficient across the board, offer up the data. Once you aggregate the data, you really pretty much, it leads to, this is hard to say, the democratization of data. So you've really taken down those barriers to entry. You don't need to know where to go to get the information. It's all right there, which means you can take a younger person and scale their understanding of how to view the market, how to select comparables, how to develop an opinion of value, and ultimately support it based in that market. And so you could take somebody who's only a couple, 6 to 9 months in on our system and make them, really behave as if they are a 3 to 5 year veteran pretty quickly.
And one other thing, Michael, I know one last thing.
Yeah, please, Jeff.
We talked about, people wanting to, move it down the street or cross the street, putting their shingle up. And one of the things is that a lot of people don't realize or think about, and I talk about this all the time, is if I'm 60, 70, 80, 90 years old and I'm still doing appraising, maybe it's time I can maybe turn that business over to someone. And instead of me just shutting it down and going out of business and closing my doors, if I'm training someone, they could maybe take that business and keep it going. May not be a family member. Maybe somebody that's eager, and you pay them or they pay you a portion of that business, and they keep that business going. So you can make money as a owner of a business if you get a cut of that, that person's business for a certain amount of time. So there's all those kinds of things that I think appraisers don't think about that people do at other businesses all the time.
Yep, that is definitely the case. A lot of possibilities out there. Just, I don't remember which wise person it was. It might have been in one of our peers here on this podcast, but it might not have been, that said, we cannot solve today's problems with the thinking that got us into it. And that's a lot of what we're addressing here. It's appraisal, for the most part, still has a anonymity factor. It's not well known, kind of hidden out. It has an image issue. There's a lot to that, and it also has a quality of training and peership, and the kind of cooperation competition piece that makes it more difficult. Whereas, as you touched on, Jeff, and I can't wait to see you get your law degree, but that ability of how attorneys work together in a coordinated fashion in a way that many, but not all, real estate appraisers and valuers don't. A number of them do, but a lot of them don't. They're kind of like, well, I can't show you anything because you're over there. So, hopefully this podcast is a small way to make a big dent in the world, like water over a rock, a little bit every episode. Just keeps shedding light, informing, instructing, educating, and hopefully activating people to jump in and make a difference or be that difference. And so I hope that this version of Pub Chat for the PahRooZings podcast is advanced that. And I do appreciate Megan asking the tough question. Woof! Talk about dropping the hammer right there as we get near. So, and our final question, the final go around, a little bit different take on the question you asked Jeff and Megan posed back to you, but that is when you look back over all that you've learned, all that you've accomplished, what was one thing you would have done sooner to support you or your professional development, your advancement in this industry? But what's something that you look at and like, man, now that I know what I know, I would have done that. Not necessarily not done it, but like I would have taken that action. Who would like to go first? All right, it's Jeff Hogan. We love thank him for that was the best.
Oh man, okay. I'd probably say I'd keep this brief. I'd mention the commercial thing, but I think really the other thing is I would have probably went on and got my designation earlier, because I was working on my designation, as I said before, licensing, but my license had hit. I said, forget the designation. I'm just getting my license, because that's all I was working in the mortgage industry. So, lending. So if you had your license, especially if you were certified residential, you were good. So I was going to work on my SRA. So I did eventually get it 30 years later or 25 years later, but I would have probably done that sooner. There are benefits to, and there's another plug, I guess, being in the Institute, because there's credibility, there's connections, there's camaraderie, there's a lot of business actually that you get, and people you get to meet being run the Institute at a different level. So, and that's not against any of the, there's a lot of other good appraisal organizations. I'm not, saying anything against any other ones, because I'll say this, we Appraisal Institute have our own issues. Okay, I'll just put it that way. But as an organization for notoriety and credibility, that would be the one thing I'd say. I would have gotten that instead of getting it 5 or 6 years ago. I probably got it 20 years ago.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Jeff. Who's next?
I'll jump in. Just Jeff is right. It's easy for me to say.
I like that. That was good.
You're right, Jeff.
Man, it was impressive. Wow, Jeff squared.
I wish I had gotten my designation a lot earlier. I finished all the work for my designation, then they came out with licensing. Yep. And it was like, that's all the banks needed. I was doing mostly bank work. Why do this extra stuff and pay all these extra dues? I was making millions at the time being an appraiser. All you out there listening, most average appraiser salary is just under $1 million. So yeah, you should get in the profession. We're all rich.
See, that's why she went commercial.
Oh, but
that's right. Oh, there you go. There's for your commercial. I didn't say how long it took us to make $1 million.
Oh, did we just lose Jeff? Oh no, he was saying it didn't take you how long. Jeff, we lost you just for a minute. You were saying you didn't say how long it would take to get to your $1 million, but you would earn $1 million eventually.
Yeah, earn $1 million eventually.
Got it. I got it.
If you can live a couple 100 years, you'll be good.
So good we can laugh at this. Oh man.
No, but that's really is getting involved in, and it's a lot of what everybody's talking about, getting in past me making a living, being involved in the profession, helping others get in the profession, getting involved in a bigger way. I wish I had done that earlier.
Got it. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Who's next?
I think I would have started asking my clients more questions at an earlier time in my career and learning from them. I think I took too long to get the confidence to acknowledge that the way appraisal has been done for many, many years can and should change. and that we should stop thinking of ourselves as an industry, as just a requirement, right? And our hands out for when the next transaction happens, and start thinking of ourselves as a value add earlier in the process, aside from just kind of the back end box checking. So I wish I would have come to that realization later or earlier in my career. But I'm very glad I'm there now.
Yeah, we're glad you're there too, Megan. We appreciate that.
I think that's something we need to do as an industry, though. People come to us and they'll have bought a piece of property for X dollars, and then they say, oh, we're going to make a loan based on they bought it for that, and you need to appraise it for that. They don't come to us and say, I'm thinking about buying this property. What do you think it would be worth? We're the tail end of the whole thing, and we are a box check, and we've got to make our industry not be a box check.
All right, and Michelle.
As far as sooner, I wish I would have tried to take on some of those risk management skills a little bit earlier, because I was in a mindset for the longest time of like just being an appraiser. So you kind of get, very siloed into, one appraisal, one report, doing my job, doing my thing, and not collaborating with the person to your left and to your right. So it wasn't until that I a good, 15, 20 years into my career that I started talking to, people kind of like related to my industry, like in the banking business and community. It's like to understand what my appraisal means and what piece that fits into the overall puzzle. I was just like, this is my appraisal, this is my value, next, and not having that big picture view. So, taking on additional skills of like risk management, things like that really opened up my eyes. And that's when things really kind of took off for me, because not only was I an appraiser, but I was an appraiser that can talk to the line of business and understand the need and what was actually needed. So I wish I would have found that a little bit sooner, because it seemed to take me a long time to get into a management role, and then where I ultimately am here at with the Accurate Group. But wish I would have been a little more curious sooner and had those people in my life. But I mean, the path that I took, I wouldn't change the world for, but definitely learned some things there that changed my trajectory, quite frankly.
I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate everybody sharing a little bit of that. And again, as we always do through our episodes, we know that it's that thoughtfulness that each of us brings to share a little bit of perspective that we've gained over a period of time. Some of them know Father Time, like Jeff Hogan, and others just, they're just like Swifties, like Michelle Golden, whatever it might be. Just bringing it all together so that we can have some chuckles together. Share and learn from each other, but also inform and inspire others. So I am so grateful, Michelle and Jeff LeGrew and Jeff Hogan and Megan, that you all join us. Thank you for this special edition of PahRooZings, the Power of Values. And again, make sure to hit that like button, share this out with your peers. Thanks for your feedback, and we continue to bring informative, engaging, and inspiring professionals to the conversation for what's possible. Have a fantastic evening, and until our next episode, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of PahRooZings, Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing life paths and achievements of our guests. Don't forget to like us on LinkedIn and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of PahRooZings, Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.